Today we're going to focus on the gradient and the y-intercept and how they are very, very important in finding the rule from a graph. Once you find the gradient and once you find the y-intercept, you're able to find any rule for any straight line graph. And hopefully by the end of this video you'll be able to do this, as well as finding rules for horizontal and vertical lines. So back in one of our earlier videos, we looked at what the coefficient of x and what the constant term are when we look at a rule of a straight line graph. But now we're going to expand on that a little bit, and we're going to give these coefficients and constant terms names. So whenever I see the coefficient of x, I'm just going to call this m, and when I have a constant term, I'm going to call this c. So altogether, we have the general rule of a straight line is y equals mx plus c. And you'll see why this is useful in the next couple of slides. Remember that when we tried to find the gradient, we had two different points. We figured out how far across it has gone from left to right in the x values, and it's gone from 1 to 2 here. And how far up or down it's gone from the y values, and it's gone down to 2 values here, from 2 to 0. And we remember that the gradient was rise over run, and then we ended up getting a little answer like this. Now, as you can see at the top of your screen, we call the gradient m. So we're not really learning anything new here. We're just saying that when we find the gradient, we can say that the gradient equals -2 or m equals -2. And if we wanted to look at the same line and we wanted to find the y-intercept, this is the point where the line hits the y-axis, okay? We like to call this point here c. So c equals 4. So all we've really done here is we found out that m equals -2 and that c equals 4. And once we know what the values of m and c are, we can use the general format of the rule, okay, which is this, and we can create the rule. So in the end, our rule here is -2x plus 4. All we've done is we've found the gradient and we've found the y-intercept. Okay, now that we know that m is the gradient and c is the y-intercept, we can just put those numbers in to the general rule, which you see on your screen right here. Okay, and then once we do that, we get our rule. Y equals -2x plus 4. Let's make a different line here, okay? And I'm not going to go through all the working out, but before we do anything, let's find the gradient. Okay, so we've picked 2 points, okay? And you can see those in red. And that means our x increases from -2 to -1, and our y decreases from 1 to -1. It's gone down 2 units. So that means that our rise is -2 because it's going down, and our run has only gone across 1. So that means we have m equals -2 over 1, which means our m value is -2. Now the c value is pretty much the easier one. All you need to do is look for where the line hits the y-axis. Okay, and here we have the y-axis being hit at -3. So c is -3. Once we know what the values of m and c are, we can find the rule using the format mx plus c, or y equals mx plus c. And then all we need to do now is put in our m value and our c value. So that means that we have y equals -2x plus -4. So when we have a plus and a minus, okay, if we remember from much earlier on in the year, okay, right here, this turns into be just a minus. So our rule is y equals -2x minus 4. And that's how you find the rule just from finding the gradient and the y-intercept. So here we have a horizontal line, and we want to find the m and c value of this line in order to find our rule. So the easier one is usually to find the y-intercept, and this is the point where the line hits the y-axis. Okay, and that's now we can say that c equals 3. But how do we find the gradient? If you remember from the last video, we said that walking on a flat surface is really easy. You don't really walk uphill. You don't need to worry about walking downhill. You're just walking flat. And that means that the gradient equals 0 always. Doesn't matter where you are. So if it's flat, the gradient is 0. So that means m equals 0. Okay, now we can take these two values and substitute them into the gradient intercept form, which is y equals mx plus c. So put them in there. We've got 0 times x plus 3. And anything timesing with 0 is just 0. So that means we're left with just y equals 3. Vertical lines are a little bit different, but we're just going to keep it simple and say that if you have a vertical line right here, as you see on your screen, we can say that the rule is x equals 2. Okay, notice how we're not saying y equals, we're saying x equals 2. And if we had another line here, okay, we can say that x now equals -1. So all you're really saying here is x equals something for a vertical line, and the number is the point at which it hits the x-axis. So in both of these situations, it was either 2 or -1. Let's sum up horizontal and vertical lines. So as we just saw, vertical line here has the rule as x equals 2, and this line here has the rule of x equals -1. Now if we had a graph here with a line going across that way, okay, we can see that the y-intercept is at 3. Okay, so we can say that the rule here is y equals 3. And if we had another line here, you can see that the y-intercept is at -2. So our rule is y equals -2. I just want you to pay attention to the difference between vertical and horizontal lines. On the top half of your screen, okay, these two values here, it says x equals a number. And the way to remember this, sometimes it's easy to get confused whether it's x equals the number or y equals the number. Look at the graph here. You can see that the line is going through the x-axis, and that's when you know that your rule should be x equals something. On the bottom half of your screen, you can see that the horizontal lines are going through the y-axis, which means you must have y equals something, as you can see here. And just like here, it's on the bottom half where the next value is y equals -2. Okay, so just think about which axis the line is crossing. And if it's crossing the x-axis, you should get your rule being x equals something. And if it's crossing the y-axis, your rule should be y equals something, depending on where it crosses.